Have you ever felt alone even when you were surrounded by people? Have you ever had the feeling that no matter how much you interact, something inside you remains isolated, unreachable, as if an essential presence was missing, your own? We live in an age that glorifies connections, likes, and instant messaging. Being social has become almost a moral obligation, and being alone a sign of failure or rejection. But what if this view is distorted? What if the thing we fear so much, loneliness, is actually an invitation to something much more powerful? Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer believed that solitude was not a punishment, but a privilege reserved for those who have inner wealth. For him, great minds do not need the constant hubbub of society. They flourish in silence. The paradox of solitude lies precisely there. What many flee from is, in fact, the fertile soil where authenticity, clarity, and personal freedom grow. In this video, we'll explore how being alone can transform your life, not as a burden, but as a path of self-discovery and inner strength. A journey where, instead of fearing the void, you learn to inhabit it with courage and purpose. Before continuing, check if you are already subscribed to the channel. If this type of reflection resonates with you, your subscription helps keep this content alive and accessible. The Noise Society, never being alone. If solitude is so rich and transformative, why is it so shunned? The answer lies in the world we have built around us, a world that is noisy, fast-paced, and anxious. We live in a society that not only shuns silence but fears it. Time alone, without distractions, is treated as suspect, as if the person who seeks out their own company is somehow broken. Today, being alone seems almost like a social mistake. It's as if life needs to be filled with constant notifications, conversations, encounters, and stimuli. Any pause is uncomfortable. Any gap is quickly filled with short videos, audios, and updates. Loneliness is no longer a space. It has become a hole, something that needs to be filled at any cost. But the cost is high. When we run away from loneliness, we also run away from ourselves, because it is in silence, in the absence of external noise, that we begin to hear what really matters. Our most sincere thoughts, our real fears, our forgotten desires. Running away from loneliness often means avoiding confronting who we are without the social masks. This explains why many people feel lonely even when surrounded by people, because it is not the presence of others that resolves this emptiness. It is the reconnection with oneself. And this reconnection is only possible when the mind finds space to breathe. The fear of being alone comes from the illusion that personal value is directly linked to external acceptance. The culture of performance, of the perfect image, of life exposed on social media reinforces this idea. We are only someone when we are seen, commented on, liked. But what happens when the lights go out, the cell phone is turned off, and the only presence left is yours? This is where many people get scared, because we were not taught to enjoy our own company. On the contrary, we learn to compare ourselves, to criticize ourselves, to fill every moment so that we don't have to deal with the discomfort of internal silence. The result? People with too many commitments, but no purpose, connected to the world, but disconnected from themselves. And what few realizes that solitude, when chosen consciously, is not the end but the beginning. It is in solitude that the noise stops, that the masks fall, and that the true dialogue begins, the one between you and your essence. The society of noise promises us connection, but often delivers dispersion. It encourages us to be with everyone, except ourselves. Therefore, recovering the ability to be alone is today a revolutionary act. It is as if we are saying to the world, I do not need constant approval to feel whole. I am enough on my own. But be careful. This does not mean isolating yourself from the world or neglecting relationships. It simply means reversing the order of priorities. Instead of looking outside for what is missing within, we learn to strengthen ourselves internally so that we can offer something genuine to others. This is where Schopenhauer's thinking comes into play. He did not condemn human coexistence, but he pointed out that only those who are self-sufficient can truly connect with authenticity. The next step on this journey is to understand what, for him, makes solitude a noble choice, and why it is a sign of spiritual and intellectual maturity. Schopenhauer and the solitude of the strong. While most people view solitude as a punishment, Arthur Schopenhauer saw it as a sign of strength, perhaps even a privilege reserved for a select few. For him, the richer someone's mind, the less they need others to feel complete. Solitude, therefore, is not an absence but an abundance of thoughts, of consciousness, of autonomy. Schopenhauer said that the more intelligent and elevated a man is, the more inclined he is to solitude. This statement at first glance may seem arrogant or elitist, but looking closely, it reveals something profound about the human condition. Most people need the external to fulfill the internal, while few already carry an entire world within themselves. In the philosopher's view, there is a difference between the common man and the superior man. The former seeks the collective to escape from himself. He seeks company because he cannot stand the silence his mind generates. The latter, on the other hand, seeks himself and finds in solitude the ideal environment to reflect, create, and evolve. This does not mean that the superior man is antisocial or cold. He may value good conversations, sincere friendships, or meaningful exchanges, but he does not depend on them. He knows that true peace is born within, and that no external presence can replace this balance. What Schopenhauer was really criticizing was the superficiality of social interactions. He believed that most of the time we are just playing roles. We wear masks to fit in, to please, to belong. But in these masks, we often lose ourselves. Solitude, and when embraced, removes these filters and brings us face to face with who we really are. And that is challenging. It's easier to go with the flow, laugh at what others laugh at, talk about what's trending, repeat opinions without thinking too much. But there's a price to living like this. You never really know yourself. And if you don't know yourself, you live at the mercy of what others expect, not what you really want. Schopenhauer then proposes an inversion. What if instead of running away from solitude, we sought it as a form of strengthening? What if time alone was seen as a temple and not as a prison? Those who manage to transform solitude into a space for internal construction not only become more authentic, but also freer. They learn to think for themselves, to question what everyone accepts, to build values that really make sense. In a world of echo and repetition, this is revolutionary. Furthermore, Schopenhauer recognized that most human relationships are tainted by self-interest, vanity, or sheer convenience. When you no longer depend on these, your relationships become more selective, more honest, more human. You are no longer seeking fulfillment. You are seeking truth. It is precisely this inner truth that we begin to access when we cultivate solitude with intention. And that is what we will talk about in the next chapter: how to transform time alone into a space of expansion, creativity, and clarity. If this content is making sense to you so far, leave a like on the video. It's a simple gesture, but it really helps the channel reach more people who are also looking for something deeper. Solitude as a space for expansion. When we hear the word loneliness, we almost always associate it with sadness, abandonment, or exclusion. But there is a fundamental difference between forced solitude, that which is imposed by circumstances, and intentional solitude, which is consciously chosen as a space for inner nourishment. This difference changes everything. Solitude is not the absence of company, it is the presence of oneself. It is the moment when we stop seeking outside ourselves what can only be cultivated within. Instead of filling our time with distractions, we begin to occupy it with reflection, silence, and deep listening. Solitude is not a hole, it is a sanctuary. Think of the greats of history, philosophers, writers, artists, spiritual leaders. Many of their greatest discoveries were born in isolation. Jesus in the desert, Buddha under a tree, Nietzsche on his solitary walks, Virginia Woolf in her bedroom. Profound creation, personal reinvention, and insight do not arise in noise. They are born in the fertile void of solitude. And this also applies to everyday life. In a world where everyone is in a rush, those who stop to reflect gain an advantage. When you allow yourself to be alone with intention, you begin to access parts of yourself that were dormant. Your ideas become clearer, your emotions more comprehensible, your worldview clearer. You begin to identify what is yours and what was merely inherited or copied. More than that, solitude can be a space for healing. Many emotional wounds only become visible in silence. When there is no one around to distract you, what is inside emerges. At first, this may be uncomfortable, but it is also liberating. You cannot heal what you cannot see, and solitude shows it. Another powerful benefit of solitude is creativity. Without external noise, the mind finds space to imagine, experiment, and play with ideas. Creativity does not flourish under constant pressure. It requires breathing space, pause, and space, and that is what solitude offers. But you don't have to be a philosopher or an artist to take advantage of this. You can incorporate moments of solitude into your day in simple ways. Going for a walk without headphones, writing down your thoughts in a notebook without judgment, disconnecting from your cell phone for an hour, meditating in silence, even if it's just for a few minutes, drinking a cup of coffee without rushing, just observing. The point is not the technique, but the attitude. It is being fully in the moment with yourself without the need for performance or validation. It is looking within with curiosity rather than judgment. Little by little, you will realize that solitude is not a retreat from life, but a way of living it with more presence. It is like sharpening the axe before chopping the wood, a silent preparation that makes everything more effective later. And it is precisely at this point that many people begin to change their view of loneliness. What was once seen as weakness begins to be perceived as a strategy. What was once empty is now fertile territory. But how does this shift occur? How do we go from rejecting loneliness to embracing it with maturity and even pleasure? That's the next step on our journey, and it's more accessible than you might think. From rejection to the embrace of loneliness, it is common for a discomfort to arise in the first moments of intentional solitude that is difficult to name. The silence can seem oppressive. The lack of external stimuli gives way to a frightening emptiness. Many people, when experiencing this state for the first time, try to escape quickly. They turn on the television, pick up their cell phone, send a message to someone, anything but being alone. This reflex is understandable. We have been conditioned from an early age to associate personal value with social interaction. Since childhood, we have heard that the important thing is to make friends, fit in with others, not be alone. Solitude was never taught to us as a virtue, but as something to be avoided. Therefore, the first step to transforming this scenario is to redefine the meaning of loneliness. Instead of seeing it as a punishment or evidence of social failure, it is necessary to see it as an opportunity for reconstruction. What seems empty is actually space, and space can be filled with meaning, not distraction. This transition process requires practice and patience. At first, being alone can seem like a challenge, almost like relearning how to breathe. But little by little, what was anguish becomes comfort, and what was once oppressive silence transforms into a safe, intimate, and even pleasurable environment. The turning point comes when we stop seeing solitude as a lack and start seeing it as a choice. Choosing to be alone is choosing not to depend. It is saying, I can nourish myself with my own presence. It is understanding that your peace does not need to be outsourced. This change also directly affects the quality of relationships. When you stop looking to others for the completeness you lack, you start connecting in a lighter, more honest and real way. Connections become choices, not needs. You get closer to those who add to your life, not those who just fill the silence. And there is another effect, the strengthening of identity. Many people do not know who they are outside of the roles they play. Without professional status, relationships, or a group of friends, they feel lost. Solitude shows that you are someone even when no one is looking. It restores autonomy. But be careful, solitude is not isolation. The goal is not to distance yourself from the world, but to reconnect with yourself in order to return to the world with greater presence. It is not about rejecting the other, but about learning not to get lost in it. That's the beauty of solitude. It doesn't require anything more than your own willingness to listen to yourself. And the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. You begin to realize that in this quiet space lies a freedom that the noise of the world cannot offer. Now tell me, how is your relationship with loneliness? Have you ever experienced moments of solitude that transformed you in some way? Share your experience in the comments. I'd love to hear how you experience this process. The encounter with the true self. As you practice solitude with frequency and intention, something profound begins to happen. You begin to encounter yourself, not the conditioned, socially accepted or adapted version of yourself, but the real you, the one who has always been there, silent, waiting for space. Silence reveals, and what it reveals is not always comfortable at first. Without the filter of external expectations, you begin to realize what you really think, feel, and desire. You discover that many of your decisions were made to please, to belong, or to avoid confrontation, that some goals were not yours, but inherited, that certain relationships were sustained only by the fear of absence. It's as if in the absence of social noise, the social masks begin to fall away, one by one. The persona you wear at work, with your friends, with your family, on social media, all these layers become visible. And with that comes the rare opportunity to ask an essential question: who am I when no one is looking? This is a powerful question, but one that is often put off, because it requires courage. Courage to look at the parts that have been hidden, the desires that have been ignored, the contradictions that have been swept under the rug. But it is also in this question that freedom lies. When you allow yourself to find your center, free from comparison, approval, and self-judgment, a new stability begins to emerge. A confidence that doesn't depend on applause, an identity that doesn't need constant validation, a value that is felt from the inside out. This authenticity changes everything. You become more selective about what you consume, who you will associate with, and what you invest your energy in. Your actions begin to reflect who you really are, not who people expect you to be. And this reunion with oneself also reveals something else, that solitude is not loneliness in the negative sense. It is connection. Only instead of being with the other, it is with what is most intimate within you. And it is this connection that sustains all the others. When you know yourself, you don't easily adapt to toxic environments. You don't easily subject yourself to unbalanced relationships. You don't trade your own essence for acceptance. This isn't arrogance, and it's maturity. Solitude then ceases to be just a refuge and becomes a base, an inner place that you can return to whenever the world demands too much or when the confusion becomes too great. And believe me, the world will continue to demand it, but you will have somewhere to return. Our next step is to understand how this new relationship with solitude also transforms the way we relate to others. Because despite everything, we are not islands, and learning to be alone is precisely what teaches us to be better with others. Loneliness is not isolation. Building more authentic relationships. One of the biggest misunderstandings when we talk about solitude is confusing it with isolation. But these two experiences, although they seem similar, have completely different natures. Isolation distances, suffocates, and disconnects. Solitude, on the other hand, brings us closer, frees us and reconnects us, first with ourselves, then with others. Those who seek isolation are usually running away from pain, from conflict, from the world. Those who choose solitude, on the other hand, are getting closer to themselves. And in doing so, they end up becoming more capable of connecting with others in a genuine way. It seems contradictory, but it's simple. Only those who are at peace with themselves can truly be with others without losing themselves in them. When you develop the habit of being alone and enjoying your own company, something changes in the way you relate to others. You no longer enter into relationships to fill voids, but to share wholeness. And that transforms everything. Conversations become more genuine. Friendship choices begin to reflect real affinity, not convenience. Emotional dependence gives way to mutual support. And the fear of rejection diminishes because the value you recognize in yourself no longer depends on the approval of others. Solitude, therefore, improves the quality of your relationships because you stop accepting emotional crumbs and start seeking connections that respect who you really are. It's no longer about being with just anyone to avoid being alone. It's about being with someone who makes sense, or simply being at peace with yourself. Another interesting effect of solitude is that it reduces social anxiety. When you start to value your alone time, your time with other people also becomes easier. You no longer feel as much pressure to please, fit in, or impress. You feel free to be yourself. And emotional freedom is one of the pillars of healthy relationships. People who are self-sufficient, who know themselves and respect themselves, are clearer about their limits. more honest in their intentions and more present in their affections. They don't play games, they don't manipulate, they don't beg for attention. They just share who they are and receive the other person in the same way. This does not mean that there are no conflicts or challenges, but it does mean that there is a more solid basis for dealing with them: maturity. And this maturity is born almost always in the silence of solitude. So, if until now you saw loneliness as a sign of weakness, perhaps you're now beginning to see it as a path to strength, both individually and relationally. And that is a huge step. If you've come this far, and this reflection has touched you in some way, please like the video. This simple gesture helps the content reach more people who, like you, are seeking to understand themselves better and free themselves from external pressures. Choosing solitude is choosing freedom. We have reached the end of this journey, a journey that is, in fact, just the beginning of a new perspective, of a new relationship with silence, with time, with yourself. Throughout this video, we explore how solitude, so often feared, avoided, and misunderstood, can actually be a profound form of freedom. Not freedom in the sense of being apart from others, but in the sense of not depending on them to exist fully. Embracing solitude is like coming home after years away. At first, it may feel strange, but you soon realize that this is your place, that there is space to breathe, create, feel, and above all be. No performance, no filters, just you. Schopenhauer reminded us that the value of a life is more tied to the quality of our inner world than to the quantity of external stimuli. And this is especially true today, when we are bombarded by voices all the time, except our own. If there is one courageous choice you can make right now, it is this: to choose moments of solitude, not as absence, but as a conscious presence of yourself. To choose to be alone when necessary, as a way of finding yourself again. And if this video helped you see loneliness in a different light, subscribe to the channel. Here we continue to explore deep topics, calmly, clearly, and with respect for your journey. Because in the end, what you're looking for outside may be much closer than you think, within.